Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our podcast series. Today, I am thrilled to have Leticia Latino here with us, speaking about 5G and smart cities and sort of how she's gotten into the industry. So, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm a big fan of your podcast. The work you do, it's amazing. So thanks again for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Well, I am the CEO of Neptuno USA. We are a family-owned company. I always say I'm very proud that my father founded it in 1972. And we've been building telecommunication towers ever since. We have deployed over 10,000 telecom sites. I always joke around that I always say I will never go into the family business. And sure enough, after several years in working for Merrill Lynch and telecommunications company Nortel Networks, I decided to join the cause and push out my father's legacy. So that's how I got into it.
Very good. Very good. So I think this is really an appropriate topic because we hear a lot about edge compute, and certainly smart cities are a big play there. And one of the bigger users, I think, probably are the bigger use cases for edge compute and being able to bring all of those services closer to the end user. So tell us a little bit about your technology and how it enables that and sort of how it all fits into the picture. And by the way, I will tell everybody, if you haven't seen their technology, it's really cool. And there'll be a link in the podcast description because it's, I think, very, very different. But anyway, tell us a little bit about the technology and sort of how you guys ended up in this industry.
Yeah, well, I would say saying technology maybe put us in a different, much higher level. We, as a tower manufacturer, we are a key component of every network. We make sure that the antenna is where it needs to be, and as you know, for traditional wireless deployment, it's always been more about coverage and the macro cells and those big towers that we see on the highway. And as we move into 5G and the densification and the number of antennas, is going to grow exponential. So we're facing, and every city is facing really the problem of where are we going to put these antennas, and they need to be at the edge, as you said. And so with that, we've found partners that have focused more on the artistic side. I'm a firm believer. I always say I'm in technology, but I'm a citizen as well, and I don't like to see ugly antennas everywhere. I think we have to do this the right way. So every time that there's a new design that is aesthetically pleasing and that pushes more the art aspect of it, trying to hide the antennas, I'm all for it. So with Smart Tech Port, what we're trying to do is precisely that, just embrace that concept of technology wrapped in art and art in public places, like put something that's artistic, but at the same time is doing the technology function behind it and is enabling you to put the antennas where they need to go without really making our cities uglier, if that makes sense.
Sure. And there's a principle in physical security it's called the broken window concept. But if something looks tacky or it's in the vicinity of something that looks tacky, it's more apt to be vandalized. And I think making these antennas look more like works of art kind of discourages some of that horrible behavior.
Absolutely. And it's definitely it's a great point. It's one of our concerns, because these are, the point how this works as a tower, right? These are like condos. And then you want to bring as many tenants as possible so that you have one location and you maximize the use of that location so that we minimize having repetitive towers with antennas. And so with these two, it's like we're trying to shoot for three carriers, wireless carriers on it that they can put their 5G antennas and you cannot see them. And then you can have sensor companies that can place sensors there and IoT applications, LED screens. So it's really a multi-purpose structure that provides a lot of citizen engagement services.
Yeah, I think people sort of just assume that those services are out there and they don't realize that there's all these pieces and components that make that work together. And the more smart city technology that comes out, really, the more necessary these are going to be, and probably a lot more locations just from usable bandwidth standpoint and saturation and making sure that there's enough wireless services out there for citizens. So tell us about one of the coolest implementations you've done. Like what was an application your antennas got or your towers got used for that you set back and said, wow, that's pretty different.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned because we are trying to break into the market and break into the system. So we are trying to move from the paradigm where it sounds great to actual implementations. We have implemented through our partner some of these already in Asia and Europe, but basically, all the LED screens with interactive software, for example, for restaurant reservations that you are walking in town, this pre-COVID, and you can, access an application within the structure where they tell you where there's availability to go eat, or you can charge the phone. We're putting phone charges into these structures, so you can sit and charge your phone and then move on. So I think those are some of the cool things that we are able to do with these kind of structures.
Oh, nice, nice. And on top of that, obviously, when sensors come into play, some of the smart city work that we've done, it can really encompass everything: fire, number of human bodies that have passed by, number of cars that are passed by, all of those things that make a smart city decision better. And I think we're going to see more and more of these edge locations and smart city applications because to start, there's a lot of money savings to be had, right, for the cities and the municipalities as they move to smarter intelligence. But there's also, from a public safety perspective, there's a huge component there, just making sure that you've got the sensors that listen if there's gunshots or something else that requires emergency services or fire alarms and that kind of thing. All of that starts coming together, and the more of those systems you have and the more they talk to each other, the more intelligence you have from a city perspective. And even from an end user walking down the street, like, are the buses late? Are some of those interactive LED screens that you were talking about can really give some good information just to the average citizen.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, that you bring up in terms of public safety. The gunshot sensors is something like, thinking back to what happened in Las Vegas during that concert. If some of these structures have had sensors like that, maybe less people would have died, and the same with weather. And here in Miami, for example, we know that water management through IoT sensors is a big deal. So I think definitely that the cities have to think about this in a holistic way, because there's so many applications and so many things that can be done that they have to definitely have a master plan on how they want to roll out this kind of technology and applications.
So, if somebody were to roll out one of these towers, obviously there's going to be fiber involved for backhaul, but how much power is required? And do you guys incorporate things like electric vehicle charging? What are the different applications that you could stack on one of these? Because I think people don't realize when they see a smart pole or a smart tower out there how much stuff is really involved and incorporated in that single structure.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's stuff that we are still trying to figure out as we engage in more proof of concepts, because each deployment is different in terms of what the potential that it has. The good news is a lot of the new 5G equipment, it's powered through the fiber. It's pretty innovative, and so there's I mean, the technology is changing so much, even on the power requirement and where you get the power from, that each implementation is really has to be looked at as a one-off for now.
Yeah. And how many, if you took a sort of a tier two or tier three city, like in some of the city deployments that you've done, how many towers does it take around a city for an average deployment?
Well, that's really depends on the the RF design for the carriers. It's more, we don't get involved in that parts too much. We provide, I call it, we provide the smart city condo where to put the infrastructure. I think what the cities have to do is to identify, there's so many permits, for example, that get stuck at the city level. And this is, the current battle. We are in a very litigious moment right now because it's really the cities trying to prevent more antennas, which is understandable, but at the same time, you have to have the technology deployed. This is not something you're going to be able to stop by halting permitting. So you have to find a compromise. And our vision there is the cities know where carriers are needing or wanting to put the antennas. And many times it's let's say the downtowns or the most beautiful place on the city where no one wants an antenna because it's going to spoil it.
Right.
So that's where the cities have to identify, like, this is a very requested site. Let's put one of these, and now you provide the carriers with an option. Okay, I cannot give you the space you are asking me, but I'm giving you this one that should work too for your design. So it's really working together with carriers in terms of what do they need for locations wise.
And that's a good point. A lot of cities have these crazy ordinances, and you see these cities where you can't have a sign that's over 4 feet high off the ground, and you can't have this and you can't have that because they're trying to keep the city looking a certain way. And being able to incorporate technology in an aesthetically pleasing manner is, I think, getting to be a more important thing than, like you said, just seeing a bunch of antennas strung all over a building. To have something that looks good and contributes to the scenery of a city.
Correct. And we're not going to move into smart cities era with old fashioned legislation, because right now there's no legislation in many cities for street furniture. And more you see, for example, bus stations with solar panels, and you start seeing the technology starting to trickle in trash cans, uh, also that have 5G equipment and those kind of things, but they don't have regulation for that. So if sometimes it's so strict that even if the technology is going to bring benefit to the city and its citizens, is not allowed to be there just because the legislation wasn't written or considered things like that.
Well, and to be fair, a lot of cities were not designed even with transportation in mind. So,
No,
the roads were kind of an after effect. And you see this in a lot of the really big cities. There's no way to widen a road. There's no way because there's buildings in the way and everything else. And so it really becomes part of that city's master plan and having the buy in, not just of the city board of supervisors, but also that the people that live in the city, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to vote for bond issues or whatever that starts bringing about that smart city legislation. And certainly some of the work that we've been doing with smart cities has proven that if you don't have buy-in of the residents, it's just not going to be a successful project. It doesn't really matter how much you're going to contribute to their way of life. If they don't believe in it, it's just not going to happen.
I think that's a key point, Carrie. I emphasize, when you see cities and countries that have had successful experiences. I mean, for example, the city of Amsterdam, they just celebrated their 10th anniversary, 10 years that they've been at it. And one of the success components for them was that they engage the citizens very early on. They created competitions and say, what services would you want to have brought to the city that are based in technology? And that's what they rolled out first, based on the citizens' needs. Because at the end of the day, never before we build the cities around technology. This is a very unique time. And now more than ever with COVID, if anything, it has just accelerated. I have my kids right now, as we speak, doing online learning at home. So everything is revolving around technology and how we roll it out. And so it's very important for city officials to feel comfortable and understand the technology that's coming to us right now.
Well, and you bring up a really great point because the digital divide is huge. There's, I've got a pair of the industry, and him and his mother build schools in India, and they don't even have connectivity. And to believe it or not, there's a great digital divide here in the United States too. And there's a lot of grant money out there to help solve that. And, people don't really know that these grants exist in a lot of these cities that don't know that these grants exist. And it's not just the city, it's the rural areas too. But there's about 1 million people in the United States, or 1 million households, that have literally no access, no dial-up, no anything, and about 5 million people in the U.S., roughly, depending on what study you read, that don't have access to broadband communications. And COVID certainly shined a light on these folks that really just, these kids can't do remote learning because there's no remote services, and people have had to figure out where they're going to work for the day. And even some of the hotels now that are having trouble because there's not a lot of business travelers, are renting out their rooms as day suites just so people can have their internet access and a quiet place to work. So I think we're really sort of at the front end of seeing some big changes and a lot bigger demand for smart cities. And I think we're seeing more people move to smart cities just for some of those benefits, because they want to be able to work from anywhere. They want to be able to have their kids learn from anywhere. And it's become really sort of where connectivity is just like power. You expect it to be there and you expect it to work.
Yeah, it's considered the for utility broadband connection, and even the real estate pricing in the market. It's now contingent sometimes upon, is there fiber to the home? Is there, what kind of connectivity I have if I'm buying a home in a certain location? So yeah, I think definitely more important than ever before. I've been fortunate that through I was appointed last year to the Broadband Development Advisory Committee at the FCC, and I've been really blown away because I've been part of the industry for many, many years, but I never really gotten involved at that level. And the work, I mean, that even the FCC has done and the programs that they have pushed, to try to shorten that gap and break the digital divide is amazing. But if it doesn't have the collaboration of the private sector, it's a problem that we're never going to solve. And so it's definitely important to highlight it, and as you say, also to educate citizens, because as someone that has been in the tower business all my life, basically I was born into it. And I remember seeing my dad, his company put in a tower in Venezuela where there was no connectivity. People would come hug him because now they had a phone. And
Right.
we have lost that. People don't understand. I mean, you see people trying to sign petitions to prevent a tower from going up. I understand it's ugly, but this is giving you connectivity. This is giving you the ability to call 911 if you have a problem. This is giving internet to your kids. And people have really come desensitized. I don't know what you call
Yeah.
it, to this fact that this is important infrastructure that we need to deploy in order to give you the services you want and need.
Well, and a lot of these young parents now, and certainly the younger generation, have always grown up with a device in their hand. So they just take for granted that it should be there. And they don't realize that there's a lot of places that it just doesn't exist. Certainly when I was traveling globally, I learned that. And I would say that there are a lot of countries, like you said, Amsterdam is a good one, that are way far ahead of the US in what they're doing for their citizens from a smart city perspective. And once you start having the connectivity out there, I think the applications just come in droves, right? Because there's a way for them to communicate, and that communication is so necessary for any application.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And definitely, this is a moment. I mean, they have the Netherlands, they have a smart city application, a web portal where they seek collaboration from other countries, from other industry thought leaders. And I think it's a great approach. It's let's learn from each other. Let's reuse what worked in some places, and let's just fast track us to getting this done.
Yeah, and even some of the smart cities I've talked to in the US are starting to do that same kind of thing. They have like IoT labs, and they partner with a college, and they have part of the, part that's reserved for city services, obviously, that works at a higher priority, but some that's out there just for testing. And they're building entire college curriculums around IoT and communications and how smart cities work. And I think that, to your point earlier, that public private partnership is just really, really important to make sure that needs are being met all the way around, because cities may not have the budget, or if they have the budget, they may not have the expertise, and vice versa. You might have companies that want to do smart city applications, but without buy-in from the city, it's not going to work. So I think those partnerships are just critical to make this whole situation work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's the private sector is very willing. Like in our case, the city doesn't pay for the structure. We put the structure at no cost to the city. Of course, we have to collaborate. They have to provide a space for it. But really, how you monetize the model is the carriers keep paying a lease that they're already paying, to a tower manufacturer, to a tower owner. So the model is almost the same, but now you bring the city into it in a place where you say, okay, I know I have to have antennas come into the edge, so they're going to be closer just by nature of how 5G is. You need those antennas closer, almost street level, to in the city. So how am I going to do that without compromising how it looks? You have to make a decision. You cannot just keep delaying by not permitting.
Yeah, and back to your earlier point too, that's where that master plan is so critically important. You have to sort of figure out, maybe draw a little bit of a line in the sand and say, okay, from here forward, we're going to move and do it this way. Like some of the smart cities I talked to said that they're only going to operate on open systems. Other smart cities keep building things on top of their geographical information systems for different city services. But then, if they change their GIS package, they're it kind of locks them in, right? They can never change that GIS package. But so there's different ways of doing that. But I certainly think that consulting in that space and getting the right people in there that have had exposure and can kind of talk you through some of those things is really important. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the stuff you're doing at the FCC. I think congratulations for being a woman and certainly being a diverse woman getting to where you were. But let's talk a little bit about kind of what that journey was like and how you got there and, what hurdles you've had in that role.
In terms of the FCC work, or being
Yeah.
a woman in
Yeah.
the telecom industry?
Both. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they kind of go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the being a woman in the telecom industry, obviously, I've been in this industry officially, not through my father's business, but officially for 24 years. So when I first started, I had the detriment of I was very young. I was a woman, and I'm Latin heritage, so I had a few things working against me. In terms of being taken seriously, I felt for the long time that I wasn't taken seriously as I'd like. But as they say, you work hard, you're consistent, and you start finding your voice. And I think this is a great time for us women in terms of being recognized. I definitely would love to see more women in our industry. Although I joke, it's a great industry when you are at a conference and you have to go to the bathroom. It's probably one of the few places where you see the men lining up, and you go and fly through it.
Exactly.
And you say, now you know what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very technical field. But bit by bit, you see definitely that it has changed through the years. I think in terms of the FCC opportunity, I was lucky enough to be nominated to this committee, and I have to give it to Chairman Pai. He gave me the opportunity not only to include me as part of the committee, but he named me the chair of the workforce and skills, working group, which I'm very passionate about, because it's really about how you strengthen the telecom workforce. As you probably heard, there's about 20,000 worker shortage in our industry if we want to deploy 5G in the time frame that we want to deploy it. So it's a big problem, and this was pre-COVID. So now that there's so much unemployment and people looking for jobs, we have really a unique opportunity to provide, even the young people with career opportunities that are long lasting, because telecom is always going to be there. The technology might change, but if you upskill and pivot, you can have a career, a life career that is a well paid career. And so that has been a fantastic opportunity. I don't know if that opportunity I got because they wanted to be more diverse and they wanted a woman, maybe. I don't know. But in any case, I'm there. I'm there to take any opportunity that is presented. And it's been a great
Well,
experience.
I think the fact that you're there and yeah, I think the fact that you're there and that you can bring that diversity to the table is pretty brilliant on their part. So it doesn't really matter how you got there. I think the important part is that you're there. But we have that problem all over tech. It's not just in telecommunications. There's women are underrepresented, and I think even just the talent shortage is literally across the board. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these companies upskill and provide training programs, and certainly certification programs are a big one. But there's so many jobs in this industry where apprenticeships are a great way to get in, and you don't have massive amounts of college debt when you get out. And there's companies, if college is important, they'll pay for your college while you're working for them. So it's not like you have to make a choice. But just being able to do and look at some of the skills based hiring, like Apple has really led the charge there, and some of these other companies where people are valuing people's time in, I have this hashtag hire the person, not the paper. And I think we're really at that point where there's only 35% of the adult population that has a degree. So we can't all go after that same 35% of people, right? Or 34% for men. We have to really think outside the box. And these are good, skilled jobs that pay very well, that literally could be in any street corner in the US. And we just have to do a better job very young of getting kids and people aware that these are jobs, right? Kids have a phone in their hand. They just take for granted the dumb thing's going to work, right? They turn it on, it's going to swipe, or it's going to do whatever their game is, but they don't realize the millions of jobs behind that, from telecommunications all the way through to the cloud and even construction.
Absolutely. I think, and I think your podcast, by the way, it's a fantastic example on how you can contribute and put your grain of, contribution towards raising awareness. And that's why I was very excited when you invited me to be part of it. But I think you bring up a brilliant point, is that there's so many jobs in telecom to make it happen. But even more that these are exciting jobs. Like these are jobs that sometimes I understand that, for example, tower climbing is not for everybody, but
Not for me.
imagine,
Definitely
yeah,
not for me. Not for me.
and that's the one you think of at first, right, when you talk about these jobs. But there's a lot of different jobs that do not involve tower climbing. But I give this an example because there's a lot of young kids there that are adventurous, that do not like to work behind a desk. They like to travel. This is a job that provides all of that. At the view these guys get on each tower when they climb it, it's the best view. These are the best views ever. And
Yeah, well, I'm happy for them.
yeah, yeah. But the point is, a lot of kids don't even know about this as a possibility. They don't know. And we already produce a recommendations report that is public, and you can go to fcc.gov under the BDAT committee, and you can see what our working group recommended that we needed to do. But one of the main things is we recognize there's a brand identity crisis for the telecom/broadband industry. Like, people get confused. We hear about 5G. We sit in front of our TV. We get the carriers pushing, 5G, and it's so great, and is that, but they don't explain, like, what is it? Why is this a change? Why is this a big deal? And why we need the workforce to deploy it. So I think there's an opportunity there to really highlight the aspect of, you can come into the workforce, and it can be a diverse workforce, because a lot of these jobs don't require that you carry heavy stuff. There's a lot of women that climb towers and fix an antenna and make a repair, and so there's really a lot of options. And as I say, through apprenticeship, the telecommunication industry has TIRAP, which is a telecommunication specific apprenticeship program that it's endorsed by Department of Labor. And just this year they granted $6 million for the apprenticeship program to be expanded. And if you want to know more, the Wireless Infrastructure Association, WIA, is let's say the program manager, so to speak. So you can go there and find out more.
Yeah, and we'll certainly put a link to that underneath this podcast too, for people that are interested in that. And I think we're seeing more and more of these apprenticeship programs. I think that's another thing that's going to come out of COVID is that people, the whole in school, in college experience has really sort of been challenged. And of course, there's some people that are only going to learn that way because that's the way they learn. And I think we've certainly seen that with our young kids. They definitely learn better in school than they do remotely.
Hmm.
But uh, but to your point, where if you're living in a place where this technology or these learning programs aren't available in your local college, it doesn't mean you have to move away from home to do that. There's all kinds of telelearning opportunities here, and there's even free ones. There's MOOCs, which is massive open online classes. It's the same classes you would take in any college. You can take them for free. You don't get credit for them, obviously, since they're free, but at least it gets you exposed to that technology and it gets you some insight into what that industry is. And you can take one of those classes and decide if it's something you might like or not. I think there's a huge misnomer that to be involved in tech, you have to write code. And that's really part of what we're trying to do here is just highlight the millions of careers out there that have nothing to do with writing a line of code. Although
Absolutely.
that's
And
one
then
way, certainly.
yeah, and one thing you mentioned, I mean, to me, the biggest thing would be that some of these programs within 12 weeks, you can be making $50,000 right off the bat with no college loan. And this is an industry that needs it. We have a technician shortage, a very important one. And so this is why more and more employers are also signing up to the apprenticeship programs, because if you're an employer out there, you can get reimbursed for part of the cost of the apprentice training, and that's huge because it's a great way to grow your workforce by minimizing the training investment you put into it.
Well, and then you're going to get skilled labor too, right? You know that
Yes,
people are
yes.
going to be trained when they start, and that takes that training burden off of you. Normally, depending on what study you look at, they talk about how it's $100,000 every time somebody leaves your employment, and part of that cost is retraining somebody else. And if they come in with the basic skills that are certainly what you want, you can do. You know, that cuts out a ton of that on the job training that's needed.
Absolutely. And it also standardized. For example, TIRAP, it has, if I'm not mistaken, it has 9 approved occupations already. So these are it's 9 occupations that have a set of curricula that everybody's going to be consistent on. And so that's what we want, right? We want to train our workforce with standardized training with the same skill levels so that the career paths and the job titles are really consistent, so that also the pay levels are consistent, et cetera. Because that's one of the problems we have. We don't have a standardized training, and people change jobs for even $1 difference more in hourly wage. And so that's one of the things that we as a working group also identified and provided recommendations for.
Yeah, and that's a problem in tech altogether because when you start with a company after you've worked there for a couple of years, you're worth a lot more to another company than you are to your own company
Yep,
because
yep.
people do those standard little cost of living raises that don't really, after 5 years, you're actually making less than you started at those minimum little 3% raises. And certainly that's one big problem identified in tech as a whole with people that have tons of college debt. That extra dollar an hour means a big difference. And so normally in tech, well, at least right now in tech, they say that people work an average of 18 months before they flip careers and go to another company. And so if you think about that $100,000 cycle and realize that you're going to repeat that every 18 months for your employees, it really begs to say that you should take care of your employees, right? And keep them on payroll as much as you can because retraining people is expensive. But through these grant programs, if you can get some of that offloaded, that's just a great, great blessing. And there's so many people out of work right now that because of COVID, I think this is just an excellent opportunity to get one of those really great life skills.
Agree, and it calls for collaboration. So again, one of the main recommendations is, that we provided is to form. There's so many trade associations and industry associations already that are doing something workforce related. That, to form a coalition of these associations, and that they work together. Because even if someone listens to this podcast right now and you were to ask me, okay, where can you go to find more information about the telecom jobs that are available out there, there's no one central place. And that we identified that being one of the problems. We need a one place where anybody that's interested in what we're saying can go and find information and understand how they become part of the apprenticeship program, etc. So it's really a working together. We have many great programs. We have grants, as you said. We have the government is putting valuable resources into this. And, Congress just passed a bill that calls for an 80 billion, that's with a B,
Yeah.
investment in broadband infrastructure from now until 2029. So if we think we have a shortage now, wait a few years, because it's going to be even worse unless we do something right away and we tackle these opportunity and
Oh, for
problem at
sure.
the same time.
Oh, for sure. Because we have the same problem in the data center industry, and the predictions are within 5 years, a third of the workforce is going to gray out and retire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if there's nobody to replace those people, and certainly telecommunications is a part of the data center industry because the data center industry can't function without telecommunications.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I think that central repository is a good idea. And I think something else too that we really lack kind of across all areas of tech is great and consistent job descriptions. I mean, obviously it's going to be different company to company, some of the stuff that you do, but having job descriptions where kids can look at that and say, "Oh, that's what this is," or maybe even just little snippet video interviews with a lineman or somebody pulling fiber, or this is what I do, this is how I got here, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. But I think we really miss that in a lot of areas in tech too. Just it's one thing to say there's jobs out there; it's another thing for people to understand what the heck the job is.
Yes, yes. I think that you hit it on the nail. On our industry, on telecom, I definitely want to give a shout out on that to Nate, the Communications Infrastructure Contractor Association, and that's something that we can share the link to, because they do a lot of that. They do a lot of the videos. They show the excitement of the industry, of the tower climb. They put out some really, really outstanding media material, and even the guys at the FCC has gone, had gotten involved. Commissioner Carr is known for climbing towers with the telecom crews, and doing videos and just putting the message out there. And he even has him and Chairman Pai have a little competition going, who climbs the tallest tower. So I
Well,
think that's
they can
just
have all
fun,
that they want.
yeah,
I
but
can guarantee you he will not be climbing the tallest tower.
yes, yes. But I think when you see people at that level to willing to, roll up their sleeves, a lot of people may say, "Oh, well, is there a need to do that? Why don't they do other kind of work?" I think it's important to really go down to the workers and technician level, and put yourself in their shoes, in how's their day to day, what their challenges are. And I think, that really shows in what
It
they're
does.
doing.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a big part of it. These kids have to be exposed to all this other stuff for it even to be part of their career thought. We've had that on, that conversation on this podcast multiple times actually, about how kids decide at a very young age what they're going to do when they grow up, and it's because of what they're exposed to. And so if we don't increase that, we used to do career days in school and a lot of those kind of things when I was in school, and we don't do as much of that anymore. And so I think kids, they sort of lose out on some of those careers. People just don't get it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and they get
uh,
influence. They get influence. I mentor young girls, in schools and in telecom. And I recently went to a career day, and pre-COVID, of course. And I was surprised. Out of about 40 girls that I spoke one-on-one on, probably 30 some said they wanted to be a nurse. it
Yeah.
really it really hit me. It's like, it's not possible. It's not possible that 30 people have exactly the same answer and the same passion. And I realized this is because somehow they're being influenced into that kind of job, which is fine. It's a good job, but
Well,
it
because they
cannot be statistically. It's impossible that everybody wants to be the same thing.
Well, that's because that's what they've seen, right? Growing up, they've all been to the doctor, they've all seen girl nurses, and although thankfully it's at least a STEM degree, which is, we've come a long way where girls are considering that first. But yeah, I mean, it's because that's what they were exposed to, and that is a part of the problem is that I think people don't realize there's a really sexy side of tech when you talk about all the different places you can travel and things that you can see and places you could go and people you can meet. And it's pretty amazing that that exists out there. And we just have to do a better job, I think, of really talking about the benefits of a lot of these jobs and how fun they are, and kind of the satisfaction too. I mean, think about turning up a tower in the first time in a community where they haven't had any internet. And I know that seems so impossible for listeners to think of because they're probably listening to this podcast over the internet, but it really exists. I mean, there are places still that have dial up, or maybe even not even dial up. And people have to drive to a city to have connectivity to be able to even use an internet or a smartphone. And there's places in the world where that's not even an option. So, imagine just turning that experience on for somebody in the first time, how cool that would be.
Yeah, no, I've been lucky that I've seen it firsthand, and also after a hurricane. We work a lot in the Caribbean, and when these hurricane, even here in Florida, when a hurricane goes by and people realize that they have no coverage, that I think that's one example where it really hits them of how precious this infrastructure is, and that it can really would take it for granted.
Yeah, I was in Colombia once and the entire internet went down. And to be in a foreign country and have no connectivity is a scary feeling because the internet
Hmm.
went down for the entire
Yeah,
country.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then after about
Imagine.
2 hours, it was like, this is liberating a little bit. Or
Yeah, there's always
email.
that downside. Yes.
Or say when it comes back on, it all catches back up to you. But yeah, but it is. I mean, once you start taking that for granted, when it goes away, it is a freaky feeling.
Yeah. And not to put a plug again for telecom workers, but we were named an essential industry for the first time during this pandemic in March. Our industry was recognized an essential industry. We think, of course, of the nurses and the doctors and the teachers that have made us, our life easier during the pandemic, but also our telecom workers. Without them, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Well, without telecommunications, we wouldn't have telemedicine either. And that's how a lot of people had access to doctors and nurses during this time.
Correct, correct. But we get that people forget, and that's why part of my new mission is to just bring awareness to the importance, but also to ensure. And if you choose to go down this path of telecom, then you're an essential industry. You're a sought out technician or professional. There's many positives out of this, and there's many big companies, worldwide companies, that hire in the U.S. Technical, specialist. And as you say, this can give you an opportunity to go travel the world and learn from another culture.
Sure. And telecommunications is a little bit different in each country that you go to too. So, there's the opportunities to learn in and around telecommunications are really lifelong learning experiences. Well, it looks like we are just about up on time. So if you wanted to leave anybody with some parting words, and certainly we'll make sure that we put links to all this, all the places we talked about in the chat so people have access to those. But if you wanted to leave people with some parting words of wisdom, what would you say?
Well, I say if you're a young person trying to look for what to do, or a misplaced worker or someone that just looking for a career change, definitely look into the telecom industry, see what it has to offer. But most importantly, and broadening the scope is, we all have to pursue our dreams, and thinking about, women in technical fields and women in technology, I say the sky's the limit. We have proven that we can do anything we set our minds to do. So never allow a label or a judgment of someone stop you from what you want to pursue.
I think that's, yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. All right. Well, Leticia, I thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with us. And like I said, we'll make sure that we have links to all of this out there in the description for the podcast. But for those of you that are listening, we certainly hope that you got some good wisdom and enjoyed this as much as I did. And we look forward to hosting you on another edition of our podcast series. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Terry. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Terry. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.